Well, we're here with John Hanger, candidate for the Democratic Gubernatorial race, and we'll be talking about his campaign. I'm Karen Shuey. Also joining us is Earl Cornelius and Jim Burchick, editorial writers for the New Era and the Intelligencer Journal. So, John, some of our first questions for you is, how do you think things are going? Because right now there's a lot of polls coming out this week that show Tom Wolf way ahead of the rest of the pack. How do you feel about these polls?
Well, I'm an evidence-based guy, and I think it's clear that Tom Wolf's incredible spending has changed the race fundamentally. I mean, I listened to the smartest political pundits in the state for a year say Allison Schwartz was inevitable, and here we are. Now I suspect we'll hear that Tom Wolf is inevitable. The only thing in politics that is absolutely a certainty is fluidity, and that races turn very, very quickly. Allison Schwartz was never inevitable. And in fact, I thought she was most likely not to win, if you really understood politics. I do think Tom Wolf is a stronger front runner than Allison Schwartz was, to be very blunt about this. And I think he's a stronger front runner fundamentally because he has an extraordinary wallet. And I think this is going to be a test of what we want in our politics.
How do you counter that?
Well, let me just say that in answer to that question, I think we will find out whether you can counter that. The test now of our politics is essentially, can you buy the governorship? And the answer may well be yes, you can. And I want to be clear. I like Tom Wolf a lot. He is a friend, and he's done very nice things for my family, and he's a very good man. So this is not personal. This issue now has been boiling up in American politics for probably several decades, and the Citizens United decision added fuel to this fire. What we're now testing is whether, in order to seek not just high office, almost any office, do you have to have one way or another an enormous campaign war chest? You know, I've got more than $1 million. That used to be actually a fair amount of money in politics at this stage of the game. But measured against somebody who's got $15 million, it's peanuts. It's peanuts. So, you know, I think that's not. I'm, by the way, the only candidate for governor who's called for the existing finance system to be toxic. I've called for it to be ripped out by its roots, because I think it imperils and will impact our democracy. And I personally am now convinced the only way to stop the auctioning of the governorship and frankly other offices, high and not so high, is to move to public financing of campaigns. And Governor Cuomo, by the way, in New York State, is this year making that his #1 legislative goal, public financing of campaigns in New York. And he's doing that because he's seen the massive corruption, I use the word deliberately, the massive corruption that the finance system in New York State has created in New York politics. The buying and selling of offices in New York State. And there have been indictments, and state senators have gone to jail. And the basic cause of it is how we are financing campaigns in the United States. I think it's totally out of control. I think the idea that anybody could sort of grow up and be president is no longer true. I don't believe that is true any longer. The idea that anybody can grow up and be governor of Pennsylvania is also, I don't think, true. What you have to have at this point is one of two things. Spending your entire life climbing the political ladder, engaging in the sort of the transactional politics that's necessary to do that, or a massive wallet. And is that what we want? Is that what we want in our politics? And maybe the answer is going to be, it is what we want. Because if we take no action to change how campaigns are financed in Pennsylvania, this is what we're going to get. And in the case of Tom Wolf, I will say that if anybody is going to buy the governorship, I'm glad it's Tom Wolf. He's a good man. But I don't think that's right. And I would tell him that if he were right here. He's a friend of mine. And I would tell that to people of the state. I don't think this is good for democracy here in Pennsylvania, and ultimately not good for governing in Pennsylvania.
One of the issues that you've brought up is the legalization of marijuana.
Yeah.
And there are a couple. You've talked about a three-way approach. One was medical marijuana first, I believe, then decriminalization, and then legalizing it and taxing it. The Medical Society of Pennsylvania has said they are not ready to move forward on medical marijuana at this point. They want more studies. And then Governor Hickenlooper in Colorado said it's wrong to look at this as a revenue source solely. What are your views on this, and how would you accentuate this?
Yeah, I mean, I note that the elites of American politics are completely disconnected from the people. Governor Hickenlooper campaigned against the referendum, as did the Democratic mayor of Denver, and the people of Colorado enacted the referendum overwhelmingly. The Democratic Party elites are as disconnected from the people as the Republican Party elites are. This issue is just one example of it, very frankly. The most conservative paper in Pennsylvania, which is the Tribune Review, has endorsed legalization and taxation. People across the political spectrum, when they actually take the time to look at where we are with marijuana criminalization, come to the conclusion it doesn't make sense. And that's the conclusion I've come to. 20 states have allowed doctors to prescribe cannabis, and doctors in their medical judgment are doing that in 20 states. My wife is a physician. I know that governors and politicians shouldn't be practicing medicine. This ought to be left to individual physicians and their training. And in 20 states, that's exactly what's happening, and that's the correct place for it to be. And beyond medical marijuana, there's the whole issue of what do you do with the real world where people use marijuana recreationally. And today, that marijuana is purchased in the underground economy from people who are drug dealers, criminals. I want to, in fact, end the underground economy for marijuana. I want to do that because of basically several reasons. First, we're spending $300 million every year in chasing down and arresting people and prosecuting them and putting them on parole and having them go through the whole system. We have police officers around the state sitting in courtrooms waiting for marijuana cases to be called up when they could be actually protecting people from violent criminals. And pursuing even cold murder cases. We've got lots of important police work to do, and I don't frankly think what included in that is prosecuting and testifying in possession of marijuana cases. So it's $300 million of taxpayer money. We are also missing now clearly a major revenue opportunity. In Colorado, the politicians thought marijuana would produce about $70 million of new revenue in Colorado. It's now produced $134 million, twice what was expected. Sometimes politicians overpromise. In this case, they underpromise. And if you take that result in Colorado and extrapolate to Pennsylvania, we have 2.5 times more people in Pennsylvania. We would likely get about $300 million in new tax revenue. Now, I'm campaigning on a platform that includes no income tax increase and no sales tax increase. I'm not saying I would never ever do that, but I'm not proposing one at this point. I'm proposing a drilling tax, and I'm proposing the marijuana reform, which those two initiatives would raise $1.4 billion of new revenue or cost savings. This state has to start getting smarter about how we finance government. The second reason why I'm for legalization and taxation is that we are, in fact, administering these laws in a way that have clear racially discriminatory effects. African Americans are being arrested at 5 times the rate of whites, even though the usage is the same between the two communities. To me, that's just plain wrong. Thaddeus Stevens would agree with me. Were he here, he would say, that's wrong. To me, that's a moral issue. That's a question of justice. And I challenge any Democratic candidate. I challenge Governor Corbett to come here and say that's okay, that we're arresting African Americans at 5 times the rate of whites, even though the usage is the same. No, it's not okay. Let's also remember, a marijuana arrest is a very serious thing to happen to somebody's life. It literally damages every life. In some cases, it can ruin their lives. I've met these people, and they're basically good people. None of us are perfect, but they're basically good people. And once you have a marijuana drug conviction on your record, you're going to be excluded from certain jobs and careers. You may not be able to get certain contracts for a lifetime. It's there for a lifetime. These charges are often not expunged, or convictions are not expunged. So you've got this injustice in the administration of the laws, in addition to the taxpayer results. And last but not least, I've never used marijuana, and I won't unless I need it for medicine, at which point I would be very upset if my government was standing between my doctor and me in terms of having marijuana as medicine. I actually want to keep marijuana out of the hands of children to a greater extent than it is today. Today there is no controls, none, on the sale and distribution of marijuana. The people who do that will sell it to anybody, and do sell it to anybody, including youth and children. If you take it out of the underground economy and put it into the state stores or into a licensed business, you have better control over the distribution and sale of marijuana than you do today. You don't have perfect control. There will always be irresponsible adults who give marijuana to youth, but you will have better control. So what is happening today doesn't make sense to conservatives when they really think about it. It doesn't make sense to liberals when they really think about it. And that's why you're seeing those who are under 35 in the polls massively reject where we are on marijuana prohibition. It's about 3 to 1 in favor of legalization and taxation under 35. This is going to happen, and it should happen. We just shouldn't take 20 years to make it happen, or 10 years to make it happen. We ought to do it in a sensible way. I'm exactly the kind of candidate, were I governor, who would do it in a sensible way.
So it's okay for an airline pilot to be an occasional recreational user of marijuana?
No, I didn't say that.
Or a school bus driver?
No, I didn't say that. The employment conditions are a separate issue entirely. But you may not have, look, there are jobs right now where you can't smoke. And that's a legal product. You are not allowed to smoke cigarettes if you're going to be employed at a particular place. Not just use it, but not smoke. I mean, and the employers are allowed to do that in the United States, and I'm not here to challenge that. What I'm here to do is say that that arresting people and jailing people is a destructive, cruel practice, and that is what we're talking about today. And we've tried prohibition with with alcohol, and it just didn't work. We've never tried it with tobacco, thank goodness, because even though alcohol and tobacco have many more consequences for public safety and health than marijuana does, prohibition just is an approach that makes the real world problems created by those products even worse. So you know, we can keep on doing the same destructive, cruel things. It's destructive in terms of arresting people, and it's cruel in terms of denying medical marijuana to sick patients. Now, I've met so many Pennsylvanians who are desperate to have cannabis prescribed here. Some of them are so desperate that they're left the state. I'm from Hershey. We've got an 8-generation family in Hershey who has a 2-year-old boy in the family, a son in one case and a grandson in another case. That family has left Hershey. They've moved to Colorado because that 2-year-old boy has seizure disorders. I know that if that was Governor Corbett's child, we would have had medical marijuana here right now. And Dr. Sanjay Gupta changed his opinion on medical marijuana, who's the CNN correspondent, medical correspondent. Lots of doctors have changed their opinion. There are doctors at Hershey Med who want to prescribe it today. And Governor Corbett and this legislature, because they're so disconnected from the people, are saying no. The only word I can use for that is cruel. That's cruel. And that's where we are today in Pennsylvania on medical marijuana. And then it's destructive when we're talking about the making it illegal. To be clear, on driving under the influence, I'm here today to say driving under the influence laws would remain totally in effect. Totally in effect. Nobody can drive under the influence of any product, as far as I'm concerned, whether it's opiates or marijuana or alcohol, anything that affects. And certainly employers are allowed to make judgments about who they employ. That's a broader, different question than what we're focused on right now.
On education,
sure.
You want to restore $1 billion that you say Corbett cut.
Mm-hmm.
Where would that money come from?
Well, I've actually got a real answer to that, other than raising somebody's income tax or the sales tax. Part of the answer is $800 million drilling tax. A second part of the answer is marijuana legalization and taxation. That's about, I had been saying about $500 million opportunity for taxpayers. I think it's now about a $600 million opportunity for taxpayers based on what we're seeing in the Colorado revenues. So there's 1.4 billion. I also have been the loudest and first voice to say that charter schools must be held accountable, and the state of Pennsylvania is not holding charter schools accountable. I do support good performing charter schools. I want to say that one more time. I do support good performing charter schools. But the other side of that coin, one would think, is I and others would not support poor performing charter schools. Actually, here in Pennsylvania, we support charter schools regardless of what happens in those schools. They can even steal money and keep their charters, and that's happened multiple times. So I'm evidence-based, just like on the marijuana issue. I've looked at the evidence on charter schools, and what you find is that about a third of them have strong performance. About a third have high test scores in reading and math and good graduation rates, and that's wonderful. I think that's an important opportunity to offer particularly poor children. But then you also notice that roughly 2/3 of them have either poor performance or disastrous performance. There's about a third that have disastrous performance in terms of reading and math scores and graduation rates, about a third. And I don't know why anybody across the political spectrum wouldn't say that when a charter school tries but fails to deliver the goods, that the taxpayer money would stop flowing. I would think conservatives and liberals could agree on that. I think to me that's just taxpayer protection and common sense. But we are shoveling money from local taxpayers and local school taxpayers to charter schools, whether or not they succeed. Whether or not they succeed. And I think that's a terrible mistake. So when you look at the cyber charter schools in particular, and look at their performance, you notice that just about all of them, by any reasonable measure, are failed educational institutions. terrible reading and math scores, terrible graduation rates, high student turnover. That's one of the reasons why they have to have all these billboards up all the time. They've got to churn students because so many students come in and leave. I'm not saying there is no place for distance learning. There is a place for distance learning. But it needs to be high quality, whether delivered by a charter school or a public school. It needs to be high quality if it's going to have taxpayer support. There's $366 million of local taxes going to cyber charter schools every year in Pennsylvania. And it's educationally supporting disastrous performance. It does no good to have a child move from the public schools into a disastrous cyber charter school. That's not what this should be about. Now, if people are paying private tuition with their own money, they can put their child anywhere they want. I believe in homeschooling. You know, if a parent wants to keep a child home and homeschool, and that's not with taxpayer money, they can do that. But what we're talking about here is taxpayer-supported schools. That's what a charter school is. And then there ought to be a real focus on the quality of education and making sure the taxpayer money is being used well. And too often in our charter schools right now, that it is not being used well. I want to end with a positive statement about charters because sometimes I'm accused of being opposed to all charters, which is totally untrue. Again, I would in fact support good performing charters. They are an important part of Pennsylvania's educational opportunity for good performing charters.
One of the things that Governor Corbett has talked about is that he has not imposed a severance tax on drilling, primarily because of the high corporate net income tax in Pennsylvania. You're talking about imposing a tax on the drillers. Would you lower the CNIT, or how would you balance this?
So just to bridge to that question, the $366 million that's going to the cyber charter schools, that's money that I would bring back to basic education and good performing charters. So you've got $800 million for a drilling tax, $600 million for marijuana reform, legalization and taxation, $366 million, at least the cyber charter money being redirected. By my math, I'm up to about $1.8 billion of money that is either new revenue or existing money that should be redirected to the $1 billion. So I've got a responsible way of right-sizing and redirecting our education funding. I can do the $1 billion and actually have some more investments. So to the drilling question, I've spent 29 years working on energy. I came out of the University of Pennsylvania Law School and by complete happenstance began a career in energy. I was in what was called the Energy Project at Community Legal Services in the city of Philadelphia. I live in Hershey now. And in that project I was working with families who couldn't pay their energy bills. So I have a lot of concern about the affordability of the light bill and the gas bill and the water and sewer bill. I know how important that is to families. I know how important that is also to businesses. And I've spent my career trying to make energy affordable and cleaner and safer. So to this issue of the drilling tax, it is appalling to me to hear how misinformed the governor of Pennsylvania is about the energy industry. All he can do is really repeat back simplistic talking points. He says things like, if we tax them, they'll leave. Totally untrue. Where are they going to leave to? They're going to run to a state in every case that already has a drilling tax. They are also not going to leave Pennsylvania because the shale gas here is the most profitable, lowest cost shale gas in the United States. We have this resource here is the most economic resource in the United States. It's a significant comparative advantage for the state in terms of the cost structure. And we're the one state that doesn't have a tax, even though we have the lowest cost to produce and most profitable gas in the entire country. They will stop drilling for shale gas everywhere in the United States before they stop here, because this is, again, the most economic, most profitable shale gas in the United States. This governor is absolutely ill-informed, and it's one of the reasons that Pennsylvania's job creation has cratered on his watch. I don't know why any businessman would support this governor. His job creation record is amongst the very worst in the entire country. And I know he's spending a lot of money to try to mislead people about the true facts of his job creation record. But in 2010, this Commonwealth added 85,000 jobs in the course of 2010. And that was happened to be the last year of the Rendell administration. In 2011, we added 45,000 jobs. That was the first year of the Corbett administration. In 2012, in the second year of the Corbett administration, we added 35,000 jobs. And in the third year of the Corbett administration, we've added 18,000 jobs. Had we simply gotten our share of the national economic lift, where the country's creating between 150 and 225,000 jobs a month, we would have created twice as many jobs as has happened under Governor Corbett's watch. We have this gas boom that has not been properly managed, it hasn't been properly regulated, and as a result, we haven't actually gotten the economic benefits that we should have gotten from it. Because of my expertise in energy, I'm uniquely qualified to turn that around and in fact properly regulate this industry and make sure that it starts to really drive Pennsylvania's economy and benefit Pennsylvania's economy while we make sure we protect our water and protect our air. On the corporate net income tax, I've been now participating in state government as a citizen in various private capacities and then holding state office for 7.5 years. And this corporate net income tax is a hardy tax rate. It doesn't ever get cut, even when the Republicans control all of state government, which they've done twice in my career. They controlled all of state government with Governor Ridge. They had the House and the Senate at that period of time, and that was, by the way, the time when we created the pension disaster that we're now digging out of. Governor Ridge signed that law into place when the Republicans controlled the House and the Senate, and they control it now. Why hasn't there been a proposal that has not only been proposed but brought to the governor's desk to cut the corporate net income tax? I would actually favor that kind of reform. But I think that the real answer is it's a cynical game being played by largely the Republican Party and too many in the business community about the corporate net income tax. The truth is most businesses in Pennsylvania don't pay it. And most of the big ones are actually paying, at most, a tax rate equal to the personal income tax rate of 3.1% or so. And that is the lowest personal income tax rate in the United States amongst those states that have a personal income tax rate. As you well know, there are 7 or 8 states that don't have a personal income tax rate. 2 of them are Texas and Wyoming, and they don't have a personal income tax rate because they tax the hell out of energy. They have high energy taxes. Here, we are insisting on giving away essentially the store to the energy companies, even though we have some of the best energy resources in the entire world. It's totally insane. But back to the corporate net income tax, you're right, it's way too high. But I'm calling people out on this now because the Republican Party has had control of the state government now for 3 years with Governor Corbett, and they haven't done a thing to cut it. They didn't do a thing when Governor Ridge and the Republican Party controlled it, and I think partly it's because it's actually useful to have a high corporate net income tax rate for some people in politics and some people in business. They can point to that rate and say Pennsylvania has a terrible tax climate and we're bad for business, when it's not true that we have a bad business climate. It wasn't true when Governor Rendell was in charge. It wasn't true when Governor Ridge was in charge. We have actually many advantages that we could be marketing better and using to create more business opportunity here. But for some, it's always useful to be able to point to that corporate net income tax, a hardy perennial that's always there, to make the claim that we have a bad business climate here. Again, 75% of the businesses in Pennsylvania don't pay it. And I'm glad they don't pay it, don't get me wrong. It's way, way too high. But I'm also not willing to be part of the game that's going on in Harrisburg year after year, decade after decade, that we complain about it and then do nothing about it.
This sort of ties in with the Delaware loophole as well.
Yes.
And is this something that you would try to close?
I would. I absolutely agree that a more efficient tax system is to have low tax rates as possible with virtually no big gaping loopholes in it. You know, if you closed some of these loopholes, you should be able to make it net revenue neutral by cutting the overall rate. So I think there is an opportunity to have a more honest and comprehensive discussion about the corporate net income tax and how that it could be in fact reduced.
You mentioned pensions. How would you solve that problem?
Yeah. Well, obviously it's a tough question, and there's no easy answer because there's no Santa Claus that's going to solve it for us. Just like there's no Santa Claus building our roads and bridges. You actually got to pay for these things. So you know the history, so I won't go through how we got into this mess. I think at this point there are some who suggest that Act 120 alone will fix the problem. I'm highly skeptical that Act 120 alone will fix the problem. I think it was an important reform, and it will help our posture going forward. But relying only on Act 120 is not really leveling with the voters.
That sort of puts you at odds with some Democrats in your legislature, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, I'm being honest. You know, I'm offering an honest campaign, a serious campaign about ideas, and we'll see in this world of big wallets buying elections whether that has a marketplace. It sort of depends on people. Do they want to say, yeah, this is different. There's honesty here and there's some seriousness of discussion. That's what I'm offering. So. You know, I would be delighted were it to fix the problem. We all would, but we're kind of kidding ourselves, I think, if we're planning on that fixing the problem alone. So I have said there's a couple things that are further make the issue difficult, and not impossible to deal with, but difficult. There's clearly major legal and state constitutional provisions in play. Lawyers, I'm a lawyer, lawyers can argue about how restrictive those protections are or limits on what the legislature can do are. But I'm also a person who believes in the sanctity of pensions. I think it's been one of the mistakes in American life to allow pensions to be pretty much slaughtered in bankruptcy court and other places. I think that's just plain wrong. Whether the law allows it or not, I just think it's plain wrong. So I personally believe that the answer has to be a combination of two things. One, yes, change the pension for those new employees coming in. We've essentially done that, Act 120. And by changing the pension, we've reduced the pension benefit. We've made it less significant. It's a pension, a lower pension in essence for all new employees to the state. But they take that job knowing it. And that I do support Act 120. I do support that reform. But then, as to the existing obligations to workers who took the job at a different time and who are already retired, I believe those pensions have to be funded. There's an unfunded liability. And Act 120 I don't think is going to fill it all. And that's one of the reasons I've been hunting around for money without raising people's income taxes and without raising the sales tax. And you know, I started to walk you through some of the money that I think I've identified. And I would frankly use some of that money to fix this problem in an honest way. You know, Governor Corbett is just engaged in politics with this budget on this. He's obviously actually making the situation even worse and raising the unfunded liability by he calls it a collar. That's political gobbledygook talk to say we're even going to reduce what we ought to be paying right now this year to get me through this election so that I can spend the money elsewhere and raise the unfunded liability. That's irresponsible leadership yet again from this governor, and he's not honest with people. You know, that's a basic problem with that. he came forward and said, yeah, this is going to make it worse for a while, but it's worth it because I'm running for re-election and I need to do this, or I need to put some more money into schools, that would be an honest conversation. We're dealing with an honest man. He doesn't do it that way. He dresses it all up and tries to mislead people. So what I would do is identify the unfunded liability and look at the various revenue sources and saving of money that I've identified, and start being leveling with people and say, we're going to pay the unfunded liability, and we're never ever going to make this mess again. Now let's remember how we got into this mess. You know, the legislature wanted to raise the legislative pension. This was in 2001. They realized politically it would have been a disaster to simply raise the legislator's pension. So they added all other employees to the bill, even though the unions and those employees were not asking for a pension increase. This is not an example of greedy unions. They were not asking for a pension increase. And even though the employees, once the pension was raised, continued to pay into the pension fund every single paycheck, those legislators and the governor, Governor Ridge, took a holiday on matching the payments. That's how we got here. So we need to make sure that never ever happens again, and I would be looking for some way to handcuff the legislature and future government to make sure that could never happen again. I'm not sure you can, very frankly, do that, but if I could, I would.
You talked about raising the minimum wage to $10.10 an hour, similar to what President Obama has talked about. Neighboring states, Ohio and New Jersey and New York, all have a higher minimum wage, but none of them are near the 10.10 mark. Are you concerned about how that would affect small businesses, businesses that in the summertime employ youth, that might drive prices up and drive people away?
Well, again, I'm going to be completely honest. With all what I've learned by spending 29 years working on public policy, even policies that I agree with and support strongly, have upsides and downsides. There are always trade-offs. There's always trade-offs. I've looked very carefully at the academic research and some of the empirical real-world experience of states having higher minimum wages and what that does to low-wage employment totals. And I think it's fair to say that the research and the real-world experience indicates that the effect is either none or modestly negative, small in terms of employment. I think that's a fair reading of what is the impact on the number of jobs. Then what's the benefit? What's the benefit? What's the upside? And I'm passionately committed to raising the minimum wage because I think the benefits far outweigh the downsides. Far outweigh the downsides. I'm not going to pretend there are no potential downsides, but I think the benefits were shown in the Congressional Budget Office document. It included a raise to 25 million Americans. It included lifting 900,000 Americans out of poverty, above the poverty line. It does put more money in the pockets of those who we know will spend it. They're not going to take that money and go to Europe on a vacation and put it in the French economy. The people who are going to get the minimum wage increase are going to spend it right here in Lancaster in local businesses. And this economy still suffers considerably from too little demand. And this is a modest way of helping those families that are working hard and living in poverty in many cases. And it's a modest way of increasing demand in local communities. I don't pretend that raising the minimum wage, however, is going to solve our inequality problem. I don't pretend it's going to really impact the level of employment one way or the other, positively and negatively, significantly. I'm supportive of it because I do believe that it's a good idea to lift 900,000 Americans out of poverty, and I do believe it's a good idea to give the people who work hard and have the lowest paychecks a raise. So that's where I'm at on it. I think you pointed out indirectly in the question, 14 states raised their state minimum wage as of January 1st. And, Pennsylvania hasn't raised the minimum wage since Governor Rendell's term. And, I think it's overdue.
We have a crowded field in the primary.
Yeah.
How are you going to separate yourself
Right.
from?
Well, I can't do it by putting $1 million a week on TV. That's one way that obviously Tom Wolf has separated himself. What I can do is differentiate myself by the policies I take and the way I approach issues. I hope both are apparent in this interview. I've got different policy positions. There are big differences between what I offer, and I think how I talk about issues. I talk about them honestly. I lay out the pros and cons. And I frankly don't see enough of that kind of conversation style in politics. Politics is often reduced to a soundbite, and it's black or white. It's good or bad. The real world doesn't work that way. It just doesn't. In terms of some of the positions that differentiate us, one we haven't talked about is I've got a proposal to allow all Pennsylvanians to go to 2 years of community college or 1 year of state university without incurring upfront debt. Student loan debt is now a crushing burden to individuals and families. It's stopping a lot of families from even having children go to college, or a lot of students just aren't even going to college anymore. And I've got a proposal that would throw open the doors of community college and at least the first year of state university, whether it's at Kutztown or Millersville or other state universities, to every Pennsylvanian without incurring upfront debt. It's on my website. It's been there for over 7 months. I work with economists to make sure that the whole system works. It becomes completely self-supporting by the 15th year. Essentially what it does is allow students to repay the tuition check by paying 1% to 2% of their incomes once they become workers into a fund that paid for the tuition up front. I would capitalize that fund with $1.5 billion of bonds initially. Still, the bond debt interest rates are low. There's virtually no better investment a state can make in its future and its economy than helping its people be better trained and better educated. This investment will be powerfully pro-growth in our state. That to me is a wise initiative that will help our economy and help individual families as well, of course. So that's one differentiation. I have the unique energy expertise. You go to my website, you'll see lots of detail on energy and the environment. We could talk a long time about that unique energy expertise and the various policy initiatives I have come forward with. I've been sounding the alarm about the fact that we have oil trains carrying North Dakota oil rumbling through our communities, very close to businesses and buildings and homes, in non-puncture resistant oil tankers. 4 of them have blown up. One of those explosions killed 47 Canadians, basically sleeping in their beds, leveled a small downtown area. And 20% of the Bakken oil rolls through Pennsylvania. The Wall Street Journal last week published a really important story. They went to the trouble of testing 86 crudes from around the world for how volatile they are, or one could say how explosive, flammable they are. And the Wall Street Journal found that the Bakken crude was off the charts. It was the most explosive crude in the entire world. When these trains that were carrying Bakken crude derailed and exploded, it was surprising to energy experts like myself, because generally it's pretty hard to cause crude to explode or go flammable. There was clearly something about the chemistry of Bakken crude that was different and dangerous. And now the federal government yesterday issued an emergency order that requires the Bakken crude to be tested every batch before it leaves North Dakota. It's leaving North Dakota in trains, 100 tanker long trains, every 2.5 hours. Every 2.5 hours. And about 20% of it ends up here, rumbling through Pennsylvania communities. In most cases, that crude is being transported in non-puncture resistant tankers. There are modern tankers available, but they're just coming into the market. And still, they are a minority of the fleet. The federal government has said, as of yesterday, these transports, I'm basically quoting, pose an imminent hazard to public health and safety and the environment. That's their language, as of yesterday. I agree 100%. I've been saying it for now over a month. We have a governor who has done nothing to make sure that Pennsylvania's interests are protected in this issue. That's one example of my difference. I'm trying to, even as I campaign, try to alert Pennsylvanians and push for policies in the energy area that would make a difference. God forbid, that if one of these trains blows up in Pittsburgh or in Philadelphia and levels major areas. We had two trains recently go off the tracks carrying this crude in Pennsylvania. One in western Pennsylvania, a community called Vandergrift. The train actually went into a business, came off the tracks and plowed into a business. Thank goodness there was no explosion. We had another train derail over the Schuylkill Expressway and it hung over the river and the expressway for days and days and days. Right by the University of Pennsylvania, highly traveled, highly populated area. Thank God that one didn't explode, but they could have, and they have in a number of places. So the big difference is I know when I'm talking about energy, I know I have plans to make sure that gas drilling is properly regulated, that it's zoned, that it's taxed in a way that is completely consistent with the industry remaining here. I have proposals to make sure that we get the benefits of clean energy, restore some of the opportunities that other states are seizing on around the country in clean energy. We can do that here. That's very different. Frankly, my revenue approaches are different. That's a very important part of this budget. I've got the drilling tax. I've got the marijuana reform, legalization, the taxation issue, and I've got and I've also got the charter school accountability issues. That adds up to $2 billion of revenue that can be redirected. I didn't mention another thing that I'm in favor of. I wanted to say this clearly so it's not misunderstood. I do not support the sale of the Pennsylvania Turnpike, but I do support abolishing the Pennsylvania Turnpike Commission and moving the Turnpike Commission into the Department of Transportation. I'm sick of the corruption that the politicians of both parties have engaged in at the Turnpike Commission over a sordid, decade-long period of time, and I'm saying end it. It also would actually save probably tens of millions of dollars by doing away with that duplication. You can have the Secretary of Transportation and the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation run the Turnpike. We don't need a separate Turnpike Commission. Again, I'm not saying sell it. I don't actually support selling it. But I do say it. So we've got very different revenue positions. Roger was just reminding me another big difference is between me and the other candidates is, and this came up at the trial lawyers forum. I was asked the question by the trial lawyers, basically, would I support their bill that would raise the liability limits with that in auto insurance policies. This is something the trial lawyers want. I knew what the answer they wanted to hear, which was yes, and I said no. The reason, and all the other candidates said yes, which will, of course, cause car and auto insurance premiums to increase for every single person paying auto insurance premiums. For many Pennsylvania drivers who do struggle to pay the auto insurance, a higher auto insurance premium would be a disaster. It actually might push them into that group of people who no longer can but still drive. You know, we've got a lot of uninsured drivers out there, and one of the expenses that we all pay for in our insurance is coverage for uninsured drivers. So, you know, I understood that the liability limits hadn't been raised for a long time, There is a case to be made for raising it, but the downside, in my mind, was even greater, that it would simply make the affordability of car insurance worse. It would increase the number of drivers on the road who don't have insurance. People have to drive to get to work. We've just raised the gasoline tax. I should say, Governor Corbett just raised the gasoline tax. Of course, he hasn't leveled with the people again. He runs around and says, I don't raise your taxes. It's just baloney. Governor Corbett raised the gasoline tax. He's got a signature on one of the biggest tax increases in the history of Pennsylvania. I didn't want to also then support a bill, especially at this time, that would raise people's auto insurance premiums when people are having a hard time just fueling the car. So there is a whole range of issues. The last thing I want to say is another issue that I've differentiated from the other candidates on is this whole issue of mass incarceration. We are locking up far too many people in Pennsylvania, and I think conservatives and liberals are actually beginning to find some common ground, but I'm the only one talking about it in this campaign. And of course I've talked about it in part through the marijuana lens, because half of all drug arrests are for marijuana, 1/2 of them are for marijuana cases. But it's broader than the marijuana issue. When I look at this year's budget proposal from the governor, he's proposing to spend $2 billion for corrections. It's the first time Pennsylvania has spent $2 billion or more. We've now crossed that threshold for corrections. And when you look at who's in jail, there are certainly some people who should be in jail and in jail forever. I've had a gun put to my head. I know the difference between the person who did that and a person walking around with a marijuana joint in their pocket. And I know the difference between somebody who did that and somebody who passed a bad check. I know the difference between that and a whole slew of nonviolent offenses.
Somebody put a gun to your head?
Yeah.
What was that all about?
Well, I was, this is when I lived in the city of Philadelphia, when I was after I graduated law school, and I was getting off a trolley and walking to my home, and very frankly, I read newspapers all the time. I'm a good consumer of your product. I love newspapers. And I was doing it, not paying attention to what was around me as I walked from the trolley stop to my house, which was about 3 blocks. And the next thing I knew, I'm on the ground, and 2 guys over me, one with a gun to my head. The couple people saw it and started screaming at them, and real risk to themselves. Actually started moving towards them. They ripped my wallet out of my pocket and proceeded to, in one case, run away. The guy with the gun actually started to walk away like a fool. I and the two people, strangers to me, started to pursue the one guy who was walking away. He turned and showed the gun again, and we said, okay, and we backed off. And then he threw my wallet, rifle through my wallet, and threw it onto the ground. Time we called the police, of course he was gone, and I don't believe he was ever captured, at least for what he did to me. I suspect, given that level of violence and dangerousness, he probably unfortunately ended up hurting somebody and probably ended up in jail. So I know the difference between that experience and that kind of crime, which is incredibly dangerous and destructive to communities and families, and locking up people who are nonviolent. Now, we've got people who are addicted, who need addiction treatment. They're addicted to opiates, they're addicted to alcohol, they're addicted to gambling, and they're addicted to a whole range of vices that we have in this world. We need more addiction treatment. It takes money, so you've got to start getting serious about the trade-offs. And does it make sense to keep criminalizing marijuana when we don't have money to deal with heroin addiction? I don't think so. I wish we didn't have marijuana or heroin in the world, okay? But we have it. I wish we didn't have probably alcohol in the world. I drink alcohol. I don't want to be a hypocrite here, but probably the world would be better without it. But it's here. So how are we going to deal with the realities of this world? And So we got so many people locked up who just don't really belong in prison. I've called for example, veterans courts to be created in every county in the state. We have them in some counties. We've got, I'm particularly sensitive to veterans, for I think all Americans are. We owe them so much, especially over the last, frankly, 13 years. And we've been in that perpetual war. We've got veterans who have been, and members of the armed forces who have been deployed to combat 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times. These tours are just incredible. And the stress on them and their families is off the charts. And they come home and they sometimes get run into the law, and they get into trouble in some fashion or another. So I focused on veterans and tried to have veterans courts, because that's perhaps a way to try to keep them out of jail, and to have alternative treatment systems proposed, alternative quote-unquote sentencing systems that don't involve going to jail. By the way, one of the reasons I'm passionate about medical marijuana is I've met so many veterans with post-traumatic stress disorder who tell me time and time again that the only thing that helps them is marijuana. And by the way, in Israel, the Israeli military and its medical system prescribe cannabis to its members who are suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. There's some medical scientific basis to it, so it's not simply anecdotal. I'll tell you one story about a veteran and his mom. She lives in Camp Hill. She is a registered Republican, but she's switching to vote for me. She has never had a speeding ticket. Her son was a machine gunner, 2 tours of duty in the Marines in Iraq, came back and suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder. And the only thing that would help him was cannabis, and then a service dog that was given to him. Those were the 2 things that helped him. He had this whole basket of VA prescribed drugs, opiates and all this other kind of stuff, that did devastating things to him. She would go into dangerous areas to buy the marijuana for him. She told me, John, here I was late at night, never had a speeding ticket, putting money on the car seat, going back to my car, hoping I wasn't going to be mugged or otherwise hurt, and coming back to pick up the marijuana. That's what this government had reduced me to in order to do what was needed for my son. That's why I call it cruel. Unfortunately, and she's asked me to speak about it. She's asked to testify to the General Assembly. Her son, Dane, in December committed suicide. The dog that he was very devoted to died suddenly in his arms, and for about a 48-hour period they couldn't get marijuana, and he committed suicide. You know, when you start looking at what's going on with our criminal justice system and how we're forcing good people like that woman, that mother, into positions of legal peril, and who we're locking up, we're just we are at a point where we're locking up so many people that it's bad again for taxpayers. It's hurting our communities. We need to focus on the people who put guns to people's heads. That's where our jails need to be used.
Those are all the questions we have for you.
Okay.
Thank you
Well, it's a
very much.
delight to talk
Thank
with
you.
you. I've enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Where'd you from here?
We're going